Last week, Boston finally reached the end of the longest and closest vote count in the history of the city council. In the first unofficial numbers, the race for the fourth at-large seat was decided by a razor-thin margin of 10 votes. After 3 days of recounting, the winner was still the same, but with a margin of only a single vote. And we'd like to welcome the newest councilor-at-large, Julia Mejia. Thank you much for being with us.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you for having me here.
Councilor-elect, I'd like to have you go back to that moment in City Hall after that grueling recount when you finally heard the result. What was that like for you?
It was very emotional and overwhelming to hear that it was one vote. There was a supporter that was on our side when the election results came out, and he screamed up with joy, and I had to shut it down quickly because I looked across and saw Alejandra's supporters there, and I felt like that wasn't a moment to celebrate in that way. So, just being really mindful of knowing that, there were a lot of people who voted for me and Alejandra. So I kind of had a sense of survivor's guilt, which is what I'm calling it. I felt excited, but was at the same time really recognizing that it was such a missed opportunity to have two people in that people voted for move on.
Of course, one of the other results here is that even though some pundits are out there saying, no, have another recount, see if there might be something different, and the next day she comes out and says, no, this is it.
Yeah.
What did you think about that?
Well, I thought it was, when she called me, I was really relieved because, as a single mom, this whole election has taken a big toll on my daughter, and to have some sort of resolution was really nice to have some closure. Because I went home Monday night and I told my daughter, we won, but there still might be this thing about going to court, and she was like, I'm never gonna see you. So it was really great to have this behind us, and I think that it was better to end in the democratic way instead of having it be decided upon by a judge. I felt like there were a lot of people who went out to vote for the first time, many of which didn't even know how to fill out a ballot. And so there was a lot of lessons that we've learned throughout the recount that I think that we can use to really ensure that people who are voting for the first time know how to actually fill out a ballot. So it was a learning opportunity as well.
Well, one of the things that struck me about the recount, and I signed signatures for one of the candidates, I'm not going to disclose which, but it seemed to be an enormously complicated process when it was a no-brainer. When it's that close, you got to have a recount. Yeah. That's it.
Yeah, I know. It felt like we were on a campaign on steroids at this point because we had to get 50 signatures from 22 wards. That was a feat in itself. That was a big challenge to do. We already were working with volunteer staff who was already, and our staff and our volunteers were already tired. And then we had a very short period of time to be able to achieve that task. So it was gruesome, and then we weren't prepared financially for this type of situation. We had come right on budget for our campaign, and we didn't have the funds to be able to absorb these costs, but we were really committed to doing whatever it took to ensure that we follow this throughout the entire process. So at this point I'm in financial debt as a result of the recount. So that also has left this bittersweet kind of win for us because, we weren't financially prepared for something like this.
Well, and the rest of us were not prepared just for the suspense. But, once the suspense is over, we can catch our breath. You get on the red line in the morning. Michael Jonas interviewed you. But apart from that, what was it like with the other people on the train?
There were a lot of people who said, oh my God, I voted for you. You're the lady, you're the one vote lady. I'm like, yes. Lots of people wanted to take selfies with me. But people was just really talking about how important their vote was. They would tell me, I voted at 7:55 that night. I wasn't even sure if I was gonna go out to vote. Now I'm glad that my vote made a difference. So I got a lot of those during the transit, people telling me their voting day story. That was really inspiring to hear people who were like, I went to 3 polling sites because I wasn't registered at the first one that I went to, and then I had moved. So this one lady gave me her whole voting day story. She has a 4-year-old who has autism, and it was like a lot of challenge. So hearing those stories, I think people really wanted to feel a part of it, and hearing their stories has been an incredible reaffirming that we set out to build political power in communities and help people understand how important every vote is. And I think that this election, the way that it ended, really helps provide a springboard for that work.
Now, it seems that there must be a lesson in here about getting somebody to change their mind about that one vote. Is there anything that you look back on and say, yes, I'm glad that worked out?
You know, when for us, it wasn't just about doing traditional voter engagement. We were in nail salons, laundromats. I mean, there were times when people were folding clothes and I was talking to them about how important they are. I think that all paid off. You know, I was even on bus stops. I was jumping on buses and off of buses, talking to everyone. I think that this is such a beautiful story to tell, and people recognize the power of one and the power of their vote and how every single vote matters, which is what we've been talking about throughout the entire campaign. And to end with this message and reinforce it is what I find to be the best of it all.
Now, when I was looking at the votes for you and Alejandra Sankey in the election, she seemed to have more of an edge in some of the high voting precincts in Ward 19 and 20. But you did better in places like Ward 14, which is a part of Dorchester from Grove Hall into Mattapan, Ward 10, Precinct 7 around Jackson Square. What was going on in those parts of the city where you got the better vote, you think?
You know, Chris, I'm an immigrant. I came to this country when I was 5. I'm the first in my family to graduate high school. I think, you know, my working class background and all of the things that I've been through in my life, there are a lot of people who can relate to. And as a single mom, I think that, you know, we have a high population of single moms in the city of Boston, and new immigrants and first-time voters and people who have felt like they have never seen anyone like me who they can relate to. I think that my story resonated with a lot of folks who have felt disregarded and disrespected in many ways in the city of Boston, like they don't matter. And I think because I'm one of those people, I see myself reflected in every single person that I connected with in the city during my outreach. But I was also really intentional about building this, about all means all. So we had a very diverse volunteer team, people, you know, different race, socioeconomic status, gender, orientation. We were really intentional about building a coalition that really reflected the city. And while most of my votes came from low-income communities, that is what we had set out to do, is to build political power in spaces where you wouldn't see a lot of traction in. And so going to barbershops, there was this one kid that I met at a barbershop, and I was just talking, I didn't remember who he was until he went to one of my events. He goes, you know, I voted for you in September because you went to my barbershop and you were telling me about how important it is for me to vote. There was a mom who had lived here her whole entire life with 6 kids. Her oldest is 26, and she had never even registered to vote ever. And she walked through my campaign office, and not only did she register to vote, but she decided to volunteer. So I think that's what was going on in a lot of these precincts, is that people really saw someone who they can relate to, and who, like them, I'm still struggling to make my own ends meet, right? As a single mom living in the city of Boston, I think my story really resonated with folks who have felt like they haven't been heard. And I think that because I'm a little feisty, they see that I'm a fighter, and I'm always going to keep it 100% real in terms of what we need to talk about. I think that people were looking for something, at least in those parts of the neighborhoods, that they can see someone who's going to speak up on their behalf.
When I look at what campaign funds took in before the election day itself, Alejandra had quite an advantage over you, which is 42%, plus the people ahead of her were even farther ahead. Some people might be scratching their heads saying, how did you do it if you were that far behind in funding?
Well, you know, when you grow up poor, you know how to work with whatever you have, right? Once I made a dollhouse out of a pamper box. And so everyone had dollhouses, and so I made one. And I think that when you grow up with nothing, you know how to make things work. And so I was really resourceful and really nimble. We didn't even send out one mailer. We couldn't even afford to send out a mailer. So a lot of it was boots on the ground and talking at baby showers, at barbecues. You know, we didn't miss out on an opportunity to engage people, so we had to do it in a way that reflected our little budget. And so that is how we were able to do it. And we also had an amazing core group a team, a staff that was really committed to the whole conversation around uplifting people who have never been engaged in the political process. And so they were really generous with their time and energy to help us achieve that goal. So, you know, that's how we did it. We did it with knowing how to work with what you have until you have what you want, and you know, we made it happen.
Chris, what I also see going on here, aside from individual campaigns, is that there is a much larger number of people running from different communities. And I think even before the preliminary election, there seemed to be a certain amount of bonding that was going on, you and some of the other candidates.
Yeah.
Do you think that had an effect when it eventually happened?
Yeah, no, I think, you know, after the preliminary, when Priscilla Flint Banks and Domingos in particular, those two activists did not move on, I think a lot of our message resonated with each other, and I think a lot of the folks that supported them jumped on my bandwagon because they knew in terms of activism that I was the next best thing, if you will. And so, yeah, there was a lot of bonding, and I could, you know, after they did not move on, I felt like I was the last one standing. You know, I'm a little bit more rough around the edges, I'm less polished. And so it felt a little bit awkward in debates after they were gone, because at least I felt like I had some people who I can, okay. So I had to step up my game for round two because, you know, they weren't there anymore. So it did get harder for me as the election went on and as we got closer to the general. But one thing I've always said is that I'm not going to leave myself at the door to make other people feel comfortable. So I made a commitment that if I was going to run, I was going to run with all of who I am, because I need to lead in that way. And I also wanted people to recognize that we can be exactly 100% our true authentic selves, right? And we don't have to be super polished and policy wonks to be able to really be able to articulate what are the needs of the city. And I think that that is a lesson that I think a lot of people who will run now can see, that if I can do something like this, you know, with one household income as a single mom, I was working full time too while I was running. So that was a big challenge on top of everything else, that I think that other people can recognize their own power and do it too. You know, I think that leadership, we have to redefine what leadership looks like, right? And I think that people have their perception of what a city councilor is. And I think that the reason why we're in the situation that we're in is because we have this preconceived notion of what people are supposed to look like and sound like and act like. And I think that we need to turn that whole concept upside down and really think about creating space for the least likely to be in those spaces, because that's how we're going to move the city forward.
Thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you. Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity.
City Councilor-elect Julia Mejia.